Well, and now we move to the final leg of our program, and I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mohammed Lakmi, who will be sharing some pre-recorded remarks. Mohammed is the President and Vice Chancellor of Ryerson University.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the Board of Trade for inviting me to speak at this important session on addressing our talent gap. When we talk about fostering economic growth, most of the discussion is about making financial investments. But I think the focus needs to be elsewhere. We need to invest in people, in human capital. Why do I say that? Because making financial investments without addressing the talent gap is a road to nowhere. After the pandemic, the countries that will be successful are the ones that are able to develop, attract, and retain talented people. To fill our shortage of highly skilled people, we need to address some key issues. It is true our region has a lot to offer, but out of control housing prices and a transportation system that is not worthy of a world-class city don't help us. It is not productive for people to spend a couple of hours a day getting to work, and it doesn't help retain people in the region. Another key issue is making the most of new Canadians. Here is an example. During the pandemic, we have seen a desperate need for more nurses, yet foreign-trained nurses have a difficulty to enter the profession. We attract immigrants to Canada and Toronto in particular, but we don't make use of their talent. I have said this many times. It is nothing less than a crime that we have people with PhDs driving Ubers or delivering pizza. I believe we need a talent strategy, and we should not look to governments to make it. Places like Germany have it right. They have an integrated strategy of education and training that is deeply connected to employer needs. Students get experiential learning in the workplace. They get trained and they can see where their future success will be. We need universities and employers to build a national partnership that supports this kind of integrated learning. As you discuss this subject today, I see a huge role for boards of trades and chambers of commerce in making this happen. Let's start to make human capital part of the equation for prosperity. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our final keynote speaker and very special guest, the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario. Before I begin, I would like to start by thanking the Premier and his team for their leadership during 2 unprecedented years of the pandemic we've been through. Speaking earlier with Minister McNaughton, we were reflecting that one of the biggest challenges of the 2 years we've been through was just that. No one at the beginning thought it was going to be 2 years. And so how do you plan for all the steps you need to take? The Premier and his team were faced with incredibly difficult choices as our province, our businesses, our workers, and our healthcare system were severely put to the test. While much of our discussion today has focused on flexible and hybrid work arrangements, the little discussed statistic is that 55 to 60% of the workforce in this province were not working from home. Our essential workers, healthcare, public safety, e-commerce fulfillment, and construction, to name a few, were required to be physically on the job for those parts of the economy to function. And this required an incredibly nuanced understanding and targeted approach to how we proceeded through the pandemic. On behalf of our members, our business community, we had many discussions with the Premier, his office, and other ministers on ideas, thoughts, support that we were looking to navigate our way through. He was faced with very difficult decisions that would never make everyone in the province happy. So on behalf of our members, I did want to thank the Premier for helping us navigate this unprecedented time. No one envies the position he and his government found them in. And as we turn a corner, and hopefully a final corner on the pandemic, we really see the spring in his step as he's starting to champion the province's economic growth and workforce development through recovery. We had a great discussion earlier today with Minister McNaughton about a range of practical policies and actions taken to address our province's needs. Moving into sustained reopening, the ability to attract, retain, develop talent is top of mind for every business and was the top of mind discussion for today. But beyond workforce and immigration strategies, there are practical livability considerations like housing affordability and transit, areas that the government is driving. From the exciting news of the groundbreaking last week on the Ontario line, which for the first time is planning transit-oriented communities over transit, which will be great for housing stock, to the very difficult discussions underway about building out our missing middle supply through zoning reform and other types of red tape reduction. We in Ontario and in this region need to be a desired and affordable place to live for our talent to want to come here and stay here. So I'd now like to invite the Premier of Ontario to join us to share his thoughts on Ontario and what's next. Mr. Premier.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it's great to be here. And I heard Goldie's here. Where's Goldie Hyder? Well, he was here. He left. Well, I was just going to say hello to him. We went down to Washington D.C. had a great trip, and Jan, I want to thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the Toronto Region Board of Trade and all your members for inviting me here today. I also want to give a shout out to Giles Gerson. Is Giles here? Oh, they're right in front of me. Okay, you couldn't get closer. I couldn't find Goldie. But I got to tell you about Giles. Number one, he's an incredible person. And he was a Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, and is now over at the Board of Trade. So, boy, you got a good find there, Jan. A really good one. And I'll never forget at the start of the pandemic when we were in desperate need of PPE, Giles was instrumental in tracking down supplies from across the world. And I just want to thank you for that, Giles. But do you remember those late night phone calls? I'd be calling Giles at 11 o'clock at night, 11:30, saying, Giles, I found some PPEs. I found some N95s or some masks, and would unleash Giles, and away he'd go. So I just want to wish you all the best and good luck with your next chapter. The theme of this year's conference is closing the talent gap. Is very timely because we know that Ontario needs many more skilled workers. In fact, right now, hundreds of thousands of jobs in Ontario are going unfilled as our province experiences a historic labor shortage. And I'm going to tell you how we got to this labor shortage. The previous government, we lost 300,000 jobs. Think of that, lost 300,000 jobs, and companies left this province. And thanks to each and every one of you and people around Ontario, we created an environment and condition to create more jobs. I always say government doesn't create jobs, we create the environment. And in the first 18 months, we created 308,000 jobs. And then we got hit with the pandemic. It went down 1 million jobs through the pandemic. As we stand here today, these are staggering figures. Not only are we up to 308,000 that we had, not only did we cover the 1 million that we had lost, but we're up 200,000 more jobs now than we were prior to the pandemic. So that's over 500,000 new jobs that we created. And I'll tell you, this problem has never been more important. Finding good talent is the #1 issue I hear out there from Ontario businesses. And everywhere I go around the province, there's one sign I see: help wanted. and that's a good thing. And it's something we're laser focused on as a government, because our government has a plan for growing a stronger economy, an economy that works for everyone. And we continue to help connect people looking for work so that employers can recruit the skilled workers they need to keep Ontario open for business. Businesses are making huge investments and are looking to hire, but without qualified workers, they can't fill the vacancies. We need to stay focused on fixing this. We need to close that talent gap, because each of these jobs is a good paycheck waiting to be earned by an Ontario worker. And every empty job is a missed opportunity to build a stronger Ontario for all of us. That's why our government is taking firm action to tackle the labor shortage and build skilled workforce for our growing economy needs. We're investing $614 million over 2 years for employment and training supports. This includes expanding job training tax credits, which provides up to $2,000 per person towards 50% of eligible expenses. This tax credit is expected to help 230,000 people in 2021 alone, because we want all people in Ontario to have the skills they need to get ahead and be trained for jobs of the future. And we're breaking down the barriers that have stopped newcomers looking to join the skilled trades from contributing to our economic success. No one should be excluded from our shared economic success because they were trained in another country. That's not the Ontario way. And it's not how we fix the labor shortage, particularly at a time when our government is attracting game-changing investments in our economy. We've had incredible success on this front, with new investments and businesses committing to Ontario. Earlier today, I was at the headquarters of Meta to see their plans to launch their new digital engineering hub right here in Toronto. The hub means an estimated 2,500 high-paying tech jobs will be created over the next 5 years, showing to the world that there is no better place than Ontario to build the digital economy of tomorrow. Last week, I was in Windsor with LG Energy Solution and automaker Stellantis, as they announced they will join forces to build Canada's first large-scale electric vehicle battery manufacturing plant. And I have to make a call to the Mayor of Windsor. Have you ever heard that song, Electric Avenue, ding, ding, ding? That's what we're going to change the name to on that road. But when there's an investment in Windsor, and I can tell you, my heart breaks for those folks over the last 4 years. You know, the plant is open, then it was closing, and the third shift was going, and the second shift was going. When we made that announcement, and I made a lot of announcements around the province, I've never seen an impact on a city like Windsor. Everyone was upbeat, because it's not just the 2,500 jobs that we announced, it's all the reciprocal and the spin-off jobs. When you get those jobs, there's a new hospital being built in Windsor, which has been waiting for decades for hospitals. Other governments promise it, we get it done. So not only is a hospital, but the schools. We announced another $90 million to build new schools in that region. But where it starts, and here are the spin-off jobs. There's 2,500 jobs being manufacturing batteries. Then you got to look at the critical minerals in the north. You know, we have the graphite, we have the lithium, we have the cobalt, we have the nickel right here in Ontario. That's creating thousands of jobs. And then you go down the road, down to Hamilton, to Dofasco, and we made an announcement with the federal government. We invested $500 million to produce green steel, one of the first plants in the world to produce green steel. We switched over the coal plant, which is taking 1 million cars off the road, and we're installing an electric arc furnace. So you have the critical minerals, then you have the green steel, going down to the battery plant that's manufacturing batteries, and going into Stellantis that they're going to be running 3 shifts. So it's all connected. And this joint venture will see an investment of more than $5 billion. This This is the largest private auto investment in Canadian history, creating thousands of jobs in Windsor and the automotive supply chain across the province. And then we were in Honda, over at Honda in Alliston. That was another great announcement. And we just announced a $1.4 billion investment to retool its Alliston assembly plant. And we also announced a new hospital out there too. And everyone that announces auto jobs seem to be getting a new hospital too. This will ensure Honda Canada manufactures the cars of the future right here in Ontario. As companies make these game-changing investments in the batteries and cars of the future, we're connecting them with homegrown clean steel and northern minerals. And after decades of underinvestment and no progress from previous governments, we're getting shovels in the ground to deliver the type of modern transit infrastructure that will keep this province moving. Past governments of all stripes have made a lot of promises, but we're the ones getting it done. We're building the Bradford Bypass, Highway 413, to bring much-needed relief to commuters and residents of these underserved regions. Last Sunday, we announced, broke ground, I should say, not even announced, we broke ground on the Ontario line, marking the largest subway investment in Canadian history. The Ontario line is a once-in-a-generation project that will produce incredible economic benefits for the city and those who live here. But it's not just the Ontario line. These are pretty staggering figures. And it's not about me or my government. It's about everyone that contributed. So just think of this. I was down at City Hall with Rob for years. And decades before I was even down there, they were talking about the extension of the Scarborough line, 3 stops. And, you know, they'd set up the committees, they'd set up task forces, they'd set up meetings, and they'd talk about it for decades. And just think about back in the late 50s and 60s, the vision they had when they built the Yonge University line or the Bloor line, and the fortitude that these people had. I looked it up. It was before my time in the 50s, but I looked it up, and there was protests, and what are you doing? Just imagine if they didn't have that vision, where we would be today. But not only is it the largest investment in Canadian history, it's the largest transit project in North America. It's not just the Ontario line. It's a $30 billion investment that we're doing the Eglinton West line. And the great news is shovels are in the ground. They're 5 weeks ahead. We're building the Scarborough extension. We're building the Yonge extension and the Ontario line. Who would ever imagine in 2019, we sat around the table and said, we have a vision. We have a vision that we're going to build 4 lines to get cars off the road because everyone's stuck in traffic nowadays. And we're going to make sure that we build a subway system of the future. But not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 lines. We put the plans together in 2019. We reached out, and you can't do this alone, by the way, folks. You have to be collaborative. You have to work with all 3 levels of government. We reached out to the federal government. We reached out to the municipalities and obviously the province, and we all agreed for the funding mechanism. And then after the plan, the funding, and in 3 years, we have shovels in the ground, and we're boring tunnels, and we have the tunneling machines right here. It's unheard of. I want to thank the federal government. I want to thank the municipalities. But most important, I want to thank the people that were involved from every single level of government. And as we know, the population of Ontario will continue to grow as we attract more jobs and workers to the province. And not just in big cities. It's not a secret. We have a real big problem on a housing crisis here in Ontario. The supply doesn't come close to matching our current needs, let alone those of a fast-growing population. As you see around the world and south of the border, some populations are going down. You know, everyone in New York are taking off to Florida. Everyone in California seems to be taking off to Texas, as we're growing at a rapid pace of over 200,000 people a year. And every time I see the PM, I said, I saw him the other day, yesterday, and I said, load up those planes in the Ukraine and let's start bringing people here, give them safe haven, give them an opportunity to fill the jobs. And he's shoulder to shoulder with us. We're working very well with the federal government to get as many people around the world here. And so we have been working side by side, as I was mentioning, with our municipal partners to ensure we're building the range of housing options that we need both now and into the future. We're tackling the supply issue head on and moving forward with no delay because we can't afford to wait. And our government continues to deliver real help to keep costs down for Ontarians. Whether it's removing the unfair road tolls up in the 412 and 418, you know, in Durham region. I have a gal that works in my office that came to me the other day and said, Premier, it cost me $40 to travel the 412 and 418. How can they afford that? So we're getting rid of the tolls. We're eliminating license plate sticker fees. And this was the best announcement ever, was yesterday. And we're delivering on $10 a day childcare for Ontario's mums and dads. That is phenomenal. You look at the 10, they put out a list of the 10 most expensive areas in Canada for childcare. 7 of them were here in Ontario. That's unacceptable. And thank goodness, again, we worked very well with the federal government, came up with a really, really good deal for the people of Ontario. It's not about, you know, who got the better deal, Canada or Ontario. It was about the people. And we know that we have a shortage out there of people filling the jobs that we have, and this is going to help just a tremendous amount. You have some families that pay $90 a day. How can you afford $90 a day? They're going to see an immediate impact. It's going to be retroactive to April the 1st, 25% is going. By the end of the year, it's going to be another 25%, and so on and so forth until we hit the $10 a day. We'll never stop working to improve the lives of the hardworking Ontarians who make this province the greatest place in the world to live, work, and raise a family. My friends, our government has a plan. It's a plan for building modern transit and transportation infrastructure to move our economy forward. A plan to secure investments as we connect our vast northern resources to our world-class manufacturing hub in southern Ontario. And most of all, it's a plan that's attracting and training workers to close the talent gap. The other guys, they'll talk about it. As I said before, they'll study it for decades. They'll create committees, but together, we're the ones that are getting the job done. I want to thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Premier, I was just going to mention, there's Steve Orsini, the former Secretary of Cabinet. And I think both of us, just in thinking of your comments and how customarily vigorous they were in terms of the account of all the things this government has been doing over the last number of years and the accomplishments that you've made. But Steve and I can certainly attest to this is a government that's been on the move from day one. Well, we took orders, but we were happy to. We were happy to carry them out. No, I think it's, you know, there was a fresher breath there, a breath of fresh air blowing through. It was a team approach. But I have to say, you know, as you mentioned the famous dark days of the early pandemic and the search for PPE, but it wasn't long before you were calling me and saying, where are we going to build the new plants for domestic production of PPE, and we did all of that. So we're now self-sufficient in most of those categories. But Premier, I think, you know, when I think of the last couple of years, from my vantage point, you've just gone through this litany of incredible investments that have taken place. Really, in the auto sector, turned it around. It is now been retooled almost completely for the world of EV, and battery. You mentioned the green steel inputs. We've done advanced robotics. I mean, it's and space robotics. So just a tremendous amount of investment that's taken place that really sets up this province for 2030. So I think on behalf of all of us here and the board in particular, I want to thank you for your comments today and your presence. We had Minister McNaughton here earlier, and he ran through, as you did some of that, the number of investments in training, and particularly on the immigrant nominee program, for example, and the creation of Skilled Trades Ontario, which is going to make a big difference to the apprenticeship system. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
It's a real pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, that's a hard act to follow, but the good news is we're in the final stretch. And just thinking a little bit about some of what we've heard today, and we've heard a lot to digest, really super panels, a lot of great presentations. I was reflecting on the fact that it was about 25 years ago, I would say, and it ages me a little bit, we took for granted that we had a high-performing workforce. You know, this was a place that we knew had really strong workforce. And I remember when Toyota chose Woodstock, Ontario for its manufacturing plant for the Lexus. They already had 2 plants in Cambridge, and now they were choosing in the late 1990s Woodstock. And people said, well, why did they choose Woodstock, in Ontario again? And the answer was, and it was, the Report on Business covered it quite extensively, it was the workforce. They said, when things broke down at their Ontario plants, the workforce was sufficiently skilled that they could figure out among themselves how to fix the problem, generally. They didn't lose there's no downtime. In their US facilities, when something similar would happen, the plant would shut down, they would call in some, technicians, and a day later or so, the technicians would arrive and fix the problem, but they lost a day or so. So it really was the quality of the workforce that was really our banner. It was it brought investment. It brought investment to us. But that was 25 years ago, and as we've heard in spades today, the requirements for a high-performing workforce have changed fundamentally. The work has changed, the workforce has changed, and how we work has changed. And this has been, as I said, a really rich day, and there's been tons of food for thought as we build a more coherent workforce strategy for the region. Before we break for the day, there's some observations. We've heard. I just wanted to really reflect a little bit on trying to pull together what we've heard and what I referenced at the beginning of the day, which was the report that we've just completed at the Toronto Board of Trade, really focused on the talent gap and how can we fix it, which is really what today's been all about as well. Number one, we need better workforce development planning, and that means better labor market information, which has always been a problem in this country. It's still there, to allow us to identify the skills that we require with more precision. So these gaps can be tied into the immigration selection process, for example. So if we have outdated information, we misfire, and we can't afford to keep misfiring. Number two, we need to develop more robust institutional infrastructure for employer-centered workforce development. We need specialized sector partnerships that ensure that the skills we teach our workers are the skills we need, sector by sector, because they're all different, for the workforce. A huge component of that is large companies supporting smaller companies within their sector so that the sector itself can grow through established skills training programs. And I mentioned earlier today the auto sector is starting to do that so that smaller companies are getting access to, say, Magna or Toyota's skills upskilling programs delivered online. Small companies can't afford to do their own. So here, take our program and we'll show you how to do it. Three, we need clear and streamlined pathways for apprenticeships in the skilled trades. If we have a shortage of workers in the skilled trades, we need to ensure that youth do not abandon their apprenticeship journey, as many are doing now, because they feel confused and under-supported. Number four, we need smoother immigration pathways, we've heard a lot about this today, that allow new Canadians to unlock the value of their education and experience in our labor markets. We need to get PhDs out of taxi cabs and Ubers and into our economy's driver's seat. In our report, we call for the creation of a central repository for immigrant skills, so they don't need endlessly repeat their qualifications. And you hear of that a lot. This repository should be accessible to employers, post-secondary institutions, and professional colleges. Thankfully, Ontario, in addition to pushing for a significant increase in the immigrant nominee program, we've heard it's going to double from 90,000 to 180,000. It has announced its intention to remove barriers to foreign workers entering the labor force. That includes eliminating Canadian work experience requirements from professional registration and licensing, a key step. Number 5, we need much more work-integrated experiential learning. We heard of PD, as we heard today. If we want to build young people's skills and experience, we need to get them into workplaces early. The federal government announced $721 million for youth workforce development, which includes work-integrated learning opportunities. The province is also funding, as we heard, co-op programs to create more opportunities for students. This is great, but we need to see more of that kind of leadership. As we part ways today, I once again want to thank the sponsors who made this event happen. Our summit presenting sponsors, Scotiabank and the University of Toronto, thank you for joining us today, as well as our summit sponsors, Accenture, the University of Waterloo, and our networking reception sponsor, LiUNA, who will be co-hosting our end-of-day cocktail. The board's principal sponsors are always at the heart of our work. Thank you again to Scotiabank, the Globe and Mail, the University of Toronto, and SNC-Lavalin for your ongoing support to bring critical discussions to, like today's business community-focused approach to raising our skills. Finally, just to repeat, there will be, and this is important news, an after-summit networking reception across the hall. I'm sure very welcome, and we very much again want to thank LiUNA for sponsoring it. If you enjoyed today's event, I strongly encourage you to follow the Board of Trade, whether on social media or by signing up for our newsletters. We always have new programming on the go. I also want to thank the keynote speakers, moderators, panelists, and of course, all of the board staff who worked tirelessly to make this happen. I give my sincere thanks to all of you for spending your day with us, and Jan does too. And there will be a networking reception just across the hallway, just over there, and you're all welcome to attend. As we move to that reception, we'll be playing a video from the reception's generous sponsor, LiUNA. Whether you'll be joining us across the hall or attending our future events, I certainly hope we see you all in person again. Thank you very much.